The Death Star plans are not in the main computer.
Hello. Welcome to Galactic Initiative. I'm your host, Jeff. This installment begins a look back at Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. We are honoring the movie's 20th anniversary. David and Sean, two close friends and Star Wars aficionados, will join me. We will recall the build-up to Episode 1 and analyze the movie from its opening crawl to its halfway point. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome, David.
Hello.
Welcome, Sean.
Hello, my friend.
Describe the excitement of the fans leading up to the premiere of Episode 1.
Well, clearly, after there being a 16-year hiatus in the cinematic experience of Star Wars, the hype was extremely high. The fans were once again lining up and camping for tickets, and then there's some pretty interesting documentaries and shows about the people who were on the long wait for the movie. It was very highly anticipated. I mean, every Star Wars fan felt like going into that their dreams were coming true. They were finally getting more Star Wars. They were getting more George Lucas Star Wars. It was going to be, the great telling of the tale of Darth Vader, and it was the storm before the calm, to turn a phrase. Everyone was hyped. Anybody who had ever had any interest or passion for the original trilogy it was a religious moment. It was Christmas. It was, pick your metaphor. It was all the dreams coming true when Lucas announced that he was going to go back and start filming more Star Wars.
I was extremely excited. I know they had the release of the toys, which we'll talk about later, prior to, so we had actual action figures to look at. But yeah, I mean, it was a very exciting time. I was over in Spokane at the time and going to college, and I know I went and saw it at least 5 times that I can remember. There was the theater in the town that I went to school. Couldn't wait. 16 years in the making. I didn't stay overnight waiting to buy tickets or anything, but I was there opening day, opening night, and just excited to have Star Wars back on the big screen.
I was very lucky when it came to seeing Episode 1 for the first time. I had a friend, a high school friend of mine, Mark Evans. He was working at the AMC Narrows Plaza 8. When you are delivered a print of a film, it comes in 3 pieces, and it has to be assembled, and then it has to be run through. This is, of course, in the era prior to digital projection. Even though the movie was the first movie filmed completely on digital cameras, it still went to the movie theaters as a 35 millimeter print, or whatever the millimeters were, 78. But yeah, so my friend Mark, he was in charge of assembling and then previewing the cut of the film to make sure that it was ready to go for the midnight showing. And so I got to see it 3 days early.
Oh.
And basically a private showing. It was the staff at the movie theater and a few friends. It was maybe about 25 people in a theater, and we got to see it a couple of days before it came out. The internet was very new. It was only a few years in the making at that time. And yeah, scouring the internet, going to the whatever websites you could find to find production pictures and or video of anything. And I was spoiler hungry, and all the things that were coming out in the trade magazines and the pictures of the characters and whatnot. And of course, Darth Maul was used as the primary marketing tool for the figures. I mean, his likeness was on the packages. Like, it just looked like it was going to be epic Star Wars. We were going to see the Jedi Order. We were going to see all the different things that they were capable of, and we were going to get Sith Lords, and again, Darth Maul was just this amazingly cool looking bad guy that we were going to get. And we in the previews that were released and the various materials, we got Jar Jar Binks, and we got some of the other characters that might eventually wind up rubbing the fans the wrong way, but they were not presented in such a way yet where we were truly worried about them. Everybody who was a Star Wars fan, or even a casual Star Wars fan, was I mean, they were running at this thing with arms open, and I probably saw it 6 or 8 times in the first 2 weeks. Yeah, it just, yeah. I mean, I was in. I was all in.
So one thing I actually did was I went back and I watched the trailer from Celebration when it was released, and somebody had a camera or whatever, and you were able to see the fan reaction of the first release of the trailer, and it gave me goosebumps even now. I'm glad I didn't pay too much attention to Jar Jar, because in those clips were some of his like goofy moments.
Well, like when you're getting Jar Jar in maybe a couple of seconds in a trailer, you really don't understand how large of a role he plays in the film and how really egregious he is as a character. You just get, like you say, you just get that taste. I will say, even all with the modern prequels or the modern sequels, excuse me, the trailers that came out for that, I was excited for pretty much every film. Like the trailers that get released, they do their job. They build excitement, they create interest, they give you just enough. They don't scare you away. They don't really tell you what's going on, but they build the hype, and this movie was no different. I mean, you see, you see the Jedi, you see Maul, you see a little bit of pod racing. It's like all those things. You don't realize that there's going to be a 30-minute sequence of pod racing, and that Jar Jar is a primary character in the film. So you can see that trailer, and still, even though you might get a little silly Jar Jar moment, you're like, oh, that's cool. There's always been fun and jokes in Star Wars, and you just move on. But
Well, I saw episode 1 3 times in the space of 24 hours.
Oh man,
Yeah,
that's hardcore.
I was very excited. I recall the trailer as a commercial, and I'm sitting in my living room, and I just needed the first 2 notes, and chills, right? Excitement. I knew exactly what was about to happen. And that excitement carried forward in a major way. I bought toys. I read the novel twice. It was a strange
You
release
actually had the novel
schedule.
out before?
Yeah. The toys came out in advance, and the novel came out in advance. So I was well prepared, and I saw it, as I said, 3 times in a 24-hour stretch. It was a big day and a big moment in my life.
I mean, I remember buying the books beforehand and reading them, and a lot of the times it helped me with the plot, and understanding a little bit more. So
Yeah, since episode 1, to the best of my knowledge, they've never put out the novel ahead of the film. In fact, for the sequel trilogy, the last 2 films, The Last Jedi and Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, the novels come out months after the movie.
Rise of Skywalker hasn't even come out, not even close.
March,
Jeez.
Did you both enjoy the special edition original trilogy releases, and did they contribute to the excitement building to episode 1?
I enjoyed them. I mean, I remember going. So my wife and I, we had been going out for probably about a year or so. She had really never seen A New Hope before, so, and Empire and Return of the Jedi. She's seen them on VHS, but for us to be able to go and see them in the theater together, I mean, yeah, it definitely increased my excitement for them. Brought back a lot of memories from growing up.
I was excited for the re-release of the special editions. I mean, simply for the fact that we hadn't had the opportunity to see a Star Wars film on the big screen since the early 80s. The timing of the release of those films was during a fairly significant time in my life, and so it came at the right time for me, just to escape and kind of go back to my youth a little bit and kind of forget about stuff.
I'll read the opening crawl and ask for your thoughts. Turmoil has engulfed the Galactic Republic. The taxation of trade routes to outlying star systems is in dispute. Hoping to resolve the matter with a blockade of deadly battleships, the greedy Trade Federation has stopped all shipping to the small planet of Naboo. While the Congress of the Republic endlessly debates this alarming chain of events, the Supreme Chancellor has secretly dispatched 2 Jedi Knights, the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy, to settle the conflict. What do you think?
It kind of gets you in the mood. I mean, you got the scroll, you're excited. You realize that there is a conflict going on this planet called Naboo, and it's some sort of a blockade with donut-shaped ships.
It's interesting, I guess. I don't know. It doesn't inspire great drama. We're talking about economics. We're talking about more economics. It's not like any of the other films where it's galactic civil war. Like, that's a way to start a crawl. That gets my interest. Like, there's some stuff going on, right?
The taxation of trade routes isn't enough to spark your interest?
No, that just makes me wonder if I got my full refund from Block. I just, okay, so there's something going on this planet. If George is going to set that up, could he at least tell me why? Like, we don't know why is the Trade Federation so interested in Naboo? Like, I get it. Okay, so we've sent some ambassadors who also happen to be Jedi to this planet to stop this thing. It doesn't really get me fired up. A military blockade by an economic federation or confederation? Well, what is the Trade Federation? We don't even know what the Trade Federation is. If the Galactic Republic is the established and legitimate government, it's their taxation. Okay, so they're taxing those trade routes. So are you saying that the Trade Federation stands in contravention of that? That they are upset with the taxation of trade routes because they feel like they should be getting their fair share?
The trade dispute is unclear. We receive information about the blockade in the crawl, but when we reach Coruscant, we realize that the wider galaxy has no knowledge of it. So the Trade Federation has taken these steps without alerting the Galactic Senate in a location that's too remote for thorough investigation, right? The Senate would have to be determined, and they would have to know there's an issue to want to send anyone that far for an investigation.
When Queen Amidala shows up in the Senate and makes her speech, they even say, "Oh, we want a commission to be formed. We want a blue ribbon committee to go to Naboo and to determine whether or not we actually invaded." Like, they even pretend like they didn't even do it.
Exactly. The term Congress of the Republic instead of Galactic Senate is an odd one, right? From here on out, the government will be referred to as the Senate. Why use Congress of the Republic in the crawl?
That's also an interesting fact.
No clue.
Yeah, just a quirk in the writing, or?
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, like you said, that's a continuity issue at that point, and you wonder why or how it made it all the way through. And I don't know if that's Lucas throwing out current year politics just offhandedly or whatnot, because yeah, like you say, for the rest of the film, it's the Galactic Senate, the Senate, the Republic or whatever. It's never referred to as Congress.
Never.
Okay, so we land on the donut ship, the Trade Federation ship.
The Trade Federation Lucra Hulk?
Is that what it's called?
That's what it's called.
Jeff's got his book out.
I didn't need the book for that one.
Oh.
Wow.
Mic drop.
Impressive. He's a Jedi.
When Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan arrive in the conference room, a conversation takes place, and we get a sense of the relationship between the two. But we learn that Qui-Gon cannot sense the impending danger. Obi-Wan is already he's detected the Phantom Menace.
Mindful of the
short lecture from Qui-Gon about changing his focus, but But Obi-Wan has it. He senses what's about to happen, and Qui-Gon is oblivious to it.
Well, it's interesting because Qui-Gon talks about the fear on the ship, right, from the Nemoidians. But Obi-Wan is talking about, when he says it's something more elusive and it's something out there sort of on the periphery, he's sensing Sidious. He's sensing the Sith Lords manipulating the situation.
Yes.
And good old dogmatic thinking living force, Liam Neeson says, I have a particular set of skills, and one of them is not sensing Sith Lords. So
Darth Sidious appears almost immediately. Was his presence necessary?
I think it is. I think it was a way to set up, I guess, to establish that he's starting to pull the strings. I mean, this is where it all starts for him. This is where he's taken the big steps to take over the Senate and first big power play. So yes, I think it's necessary to know that Trade Federation is being backed by, and the puppeteer who's Palpatine / Sidious.
I think that you throw him in there because you need something familiar, and you also need something to keep people interested, because at that point we're still arguing about trade routes and negotiations and ambassadors, and Queen Amidala shows up and Newt Gunray is like, aha, but now all of a sudden the Emperor shows up, and then you're like, why is everybody calling this guy Sidious? He's the Emperor. This is Palpatine, and then ultimately we get the Palpatine reveal when we meet Senator Palpatine, and then the entire audience is let in on the joke, and everybody else has to suffer through it for 3 films.
Come on, Negative Ned.
Oh, I'm not being negative, dude. Palpatine is the best part of the prequels.
Agreed.
I mean, ultimately, the performance of Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan as the 3 movies goes on is also quite good. But Ian McDiarmid's performance in these 3 films is stellar.
There'll be a few issues in episode 3, but we'll get there. The first
Would
scene...
those be unnatural?
No, that was terrific. That was terrific. Given that writing, it was terrific. No, the problems will come a bit later in that film. But so from the opening scene, how would you characterize or describe the relationship between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan?
Obviously, they've been through some times together, and this is just one more in a long list of things that they've done. But I think as we've seen through the Clone Wars and stuff like that, I think there comes a time and a point where the apprentice or Padawan has to branch off, and I mean, it's obvious that is where they're kind of at. I mean, you can only learn so much before going off and doing your own thing.
I mean, I understand that by the time we get to the end of the film and we have all of the various dialogue scenes with Obi-Wan, that is where they're at, because that's where the exposition carries you. But I don't know, like their interaction felt teamworky, even though it's supposed to be a master and apprentice relationship, and the dialogue was master and apprentice. Qui-Gon is telling him to get his mind right and get on board with the big win, but it doesn't feel like a relationship where one is dominant over the other. It feels more chummy, I guess, for lack of a better word.
But I mean, again, that's with being together for so long. You're kind of a tag team, and at some point you gotta branch off. So yeah, I get it.
Something about this scene, as we super analyze it, and of course we have the gift of hindsight and all of the other movies and the prequels. There's a lot of stuff going on there, but it feels like Obi-Wan was the last one who was able to actually work with the Force outside of the council and the dogmatic application of whatever the code of the Jedi might be at that point, where we're not allowed to look to the future and all his emotion is the future and all stuff. But it's like Obi-Wan in the first 5 minutes of this film is like, yo, there's something going on out there. It's bad. And, it's behind the scenes and it's intentionally hiding from us. And we need to, figure this out. And Qui-Gon's like, negotiations, tea, chill out. And it ruins it for everybody. And ultimately the Republic falls and Palpatine is the Emperor. But, butterfly effects or whatever you want to call it.
I recall struggling to understand the Trade Federation's leaders, the Nemoidians. Accents caused a problem for me. Did you have the same issue when you first watched the movie?
It took me 3 times to really understand what they were saying.
What? Are you brain dead?
Yep. Do you think it would have been better if they would have just made up some goofy language and put subtitles at the bottom and then gone with that instead of trying to make it into English? And do you think we think differently of these characters?
Well, the characters have too much dialogue to be subtitled or translated. So no, I think the language had to be English, but I question. It's obvious from the first viewing that Lucas has gone down a road he should not have gone down.
And why didn't somebody say something to him?
Well, you see, that's the question. You have a man who is in charge 100% of every aspect of his own production, and he's the one, writing all the checks, and he's the one writing the script, and it's his universe, and it's his baby.
It's toy box.
There's a lot of people standing around who are probably looking at the dailies and going, George, we can't do that with the Nemoidians. But I didn't really have a hard time with the dialogue per se, but it was one of those disconnects where it was almost like bad dubbing, where the mouth is moving one way and different.
That's where I struggled with the bad. I mean, it did seem like bad dubbing, and that's where I struggled. And then the Newt Gunray and his cronies start to gas him, which I found out that's the only shot that was not a visual shot. Was the gas coming in. A visual effects shot, that is. Digital, yeah. Which I found kind of crazy. That's the only shot that wasn't altered. But then the droid Dakars, or whatever they call it, the droid destroyers, yeah, come out. I love the scene where Qui-Gon, he sticks the lightsaber in, starting to melt the door, and then trying to cut another door in. That was awesome. That's the only time we see them use their force speed, and I'm not exactly sure why that's the only time.
Is it force speed or is it bad editing?
Yeah, exactly. Because you know what? They never mention force speed in any other movie. You never see them going fast. Just all of a sudden, these two guys like take off and.
It's a bit like force healing.
Hey now.
So Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon split up.
So yeah, potentially they could have been on opposite sides of the planet, and then that would have been awkward.
But they reunite quickly. And
conveniently.
They meet a Gungan.
Our buddy.
Named Jar Jar Binks.
He's a comic relief.
That
and
he is.
So it begins. So is Jar Jar the worst character in the saga?
In all 9 films?
Yes.
That's tough. Yeah, he's equally as annoying as Rey, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see why people hate Jar Jar. I went through whatever steps of grief with Jar Jar. I was angry. I denied it, then I embraced it. Now I'm over it. Jar Jar to me has become one of these things where you can like him now simply because you're over the initial shock and disappointment. We've had enough other things to be upset about in Star Wars that he's not as upsetting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he could potentially be the worst character outside of Wicket. I hate the Ewoks. I really do. I'm sorry. I was the only kid in 1983 that laughed during the scene where the one Ewok was crying over the other dead Ewok. So,
I'm not shocked.
hey man, my salt goes back. I was 9 when that happened, and I was still salty. I was like, these damn murder bears. Anyway, the character of Jar Jar is annoying. Yes, he is annoying, and his role in the film is absurd. He's clearly there for comic relief early on, but the fact that he somehow manages through his clumsiness, silliness, and sheer stupidity to unite two peoples that hate each other and then ultimately get promoted to general and then being a coward during the battle, but yet accidentally coming across as a hero. And it's Jar Jar.
What an arc.
Yeah, well, then he ultimately becomes a senator representing,
He's-
the Gungan people from Naboo. So, I mean,
the reason why
clearly
the
he
Clone
failed
Army.
up. He failed up. Yeah. So I'm having a hard time conjuring another character that I hate more than him or had hated more than him. But I don't know. In the light of the sequel films as they were released, I just really kind of got over my hate of Jar Jar and started to embrace him.
Isn't he one of your top 5 figure collectors? Collecting?
Oh yeah, he's starting to be.
Yeah.
Now that I've finished my 9 nub and I have all the Grand Admiral Thrawns and most of the malls, it's time for me to really
Move
get
on.
after my Gungan collection. Yeah, for sure.
I struggle with him because I think the species, the Gungans, um, cool concept. They went way over the top with making him comic relief to be able to relate to kids, so that the kids have something to laugh about and get into. And again, maybe in this case, to sell some more toys. But for the most part, his only purpose, if we find out in episode 2, is to, basically give the approval to, create the Grand Army. But besides that, he's, from my point of view, just there to have some type of a conduit for the Jedi to be able to make it to the Naboo city. I love the Gungan city underneath the water. I love that concept. I loved the visual of it. I wish they would have spent more time down there. What could have been a pretty cool scene. Again, his accent and him being clumsy and all that. You got a lot of dry content. You got you got politics. You got trade federation stuff. You got blockades. You got to have something to lighten the story, and it goes all into one character. I would agree that he is probably the worst character in the whole Star Wars universe, except for maybe the band on Return of the Jedi.
Are you talking about the special edition?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So yes, anything special edition is definitely worse than Jar Jar.
Yeah. I would have loved for them to go a little deeper into the Gungan city or do something besides, I guess, what they did. It was pretty much hey, let's deep dive swim in and get to this really cool looking city underneath, and then all of a sudden we're in court and we're doing our Jedi mind tricks and we're back out and about.
Yeah, I would like to have seen more of that. I would have preferred that the Gungans were more, I guess, I don't want to say normal. Normal is a weird term, but like the way they formulated their sentences and this sort of everybody is kind of like Jar Jar, I guess, in the Gungan culture. Boss Nass is kind of weird. He does the shaky, spitty thing with his face.
I loved his character.
Well, I'm saying I liked him too. I liked him better than Jar Jar, but it seems like they set up that entire race of creatures to be kind of just clumsy and silly. If their leader is, somebody who sits on a chair and shakes his face until he spits all day. It's like I don't really understand how they're this great warrior race that's going to save the day. But anyway, let's talk about the planet core, right? Like that whole sequence was unnecessary, and the fact that you used the Vulcan mind pinch in the middle of a Star Wars film with a Jedi,
I forgot about that.
I was like, did he just Spock that guy? Did he just do the thing with the
He
shoulder
totally
pinch?
Spocked
Like,
him.
yeah, he Spocked him. Ugh.
By the time Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan reach Theed, it's occupied. The Queen's been captured. So the Trade Federation moves on Theed, but the forces that brought them are on the opposite side of the planet doing what exactly?
Maybe it's because we've all sat and watched this movie 1,000 times. But somebody somewhere at Lucasfilm, upon looking at that, would have been like, well, now you're going to the planet core, so that's cool. So that creates a scene where we get to create two fish, and we get the two scenes, and then we get Jar Jar freaking out, and we have Obi-Wan Kenobi hot wiring the ship, and then all these things. But it's like they're not actually going through the core of the planet. They're going down to the bottom of whatever body of water that is, going through a couple of tunnels, and then coming out in another body of water near the city. I mean, this is another thing that's really weird. Sidious is Palpatine. He knows about the Gungans. Yet the Trade Federation invasion army lands. They don't know anything about it. Sidious should have been like, look, man, we got to take this planet. I need you to get in the capital and stop these dudes, but also watch your flank, because down the bottom of the ocean, there's these crazy dudes that are pretty decent with spears. Like, he didn't give him any of that.
Great point about Palpatine knowing about the Gungans. Little bit of backstory on the Gungans, not terribly relevant to the film, but it speaks to a few of these points. So the Gungans are divided into clans. There are many underwater cities. The clans trade with one another, but limited interaction. In times of trouble, they call a council, they go to the sacred place, and they form the Grand Army by bringing all the clans together. It's a very rare thing. It's like a generational thing. So the Naboo haven't seen the Grand Army. No one's really seen the Grand Army because there hasn't been a need for it in a very long time.
And that's where they go to the sacred place at the end.
Yes.
So it's like the Iroquois Conference, or the Highland clans coming together to fight the British or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, I did not get that at all.
Right. Okay, moving on. So through the planet core,
The planet core.
we reach Theed. The bongo surfaces in the middle of an occupied city. No one notices.
Mm-hmm.
In a matter of moments, Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan have located the Queen and freed her.
Yeah, she's just coincidentally and luckily
Happens
in
to
a
be
group
walking
of
by.
people walking by as they come out from behind the potted plant there. It's like, oh, hey, how convenient.
They were
Yeah.
able to dispatch the droids.
They enter the hangar with the Royal Starship under a skeleton guard. You have all of the Naboo pilots and the Royal Starship being guarded by maybe 24 battle droids. And the next thing you know, they're on their way.
Personally, I think that's one of the worst scenes, because all of a sudden just Obi-Wan just starts throwing his lightsaber around, and he doesn't really make eye contact with anybody, just is doing his moves. The lack of acting in front of green screens, because that scene right there is pretty painful to watch.
The Jedi hot yoga.
Yeah. The jump double kick. Yeah, you're under arrest. Really?
That particular scene for me, there's a lot of bad and there's a little bit of good. The bad is I really don't understand the Naboo. They just surrender a lot. You got the old guy with the pointy gray beard who's like, oh, they're going to kill us and they're going to do all this stuff and we must surrender, Your Majesty, like that guy. And then you got all those 35 pilots sitting there.
That's yes.
In their trench coats.
Right.
And their nice little, 1800s football helmets.
Right.
Just talking and just hanging out. And it's like you say, there's maybe 6 or 8 robots there. Those guys could rush those robots. Maybe 1 or 2 of them might get killed, but they could easily break free, get in their planes, and do something, magnificent and heroic. But instead, they're just chilling.
They haven't been processed. They haven't been sent to a camp.
Yeah, they're not even in the camp. Yeah.
The Royal Starship hasn't been locked down, and no droidicas are around.
Right. Now, the good in that scene, the Jedi are recognized as an independent force that works on behalf of the Republic and on behalf of the Supreme Chancellor. And they identify themselves as ambassadors. That robot hears all of that crap and says, I need to process this in the moment. Because it's like showing up somewhere and showing diplomatic credentials. You have certain accesses that the average person wouldn't. Even if you show up somewhere where you're really not supposed to be, but you flash your diplomatic credentials and somebody's like, well, okay, maybe I need to call this in to the main office and get further clarification. And that's what the droid is kind of going through in that moment, where he's stuttering and kind of like, that doesn't compute and all this other stuff. And then he says, you're under arrest, and they have to fight it out. But Qui-Gon steps into that situation with this confidence and with this boldness and basically saying, you can't stop me. I'm an ambassador for the Supreme Chancellor.
There's multiple first introductions that come off as kind of corny and quirky. I mean, you've got R2-D2 being introduced to the fans, the way he was introduced by Captain Panaka to the Queen. It was just another one of those goofy, quirky introductions that just, again, seemed kind of out of place.
I like the idea that, astromech droids are used for, in single pilot fighters, they're used as navigational components. Same thing with, the Queen's ship. Like, you have a closet full of astromech droids to help out when things get crazy. Did it have to be R2-D2? And then, they all go out on the wing, and there's 5 of them, and 4 get blown away instantly, and then R2 stays out there for like 15 minutes or whatever and saves the day, and it's like, just so. But
fan service. Do you think that they even needed to have R2 and C-3PO in these prequels? The trilogy or the saga was done through the eyes of R2 and C-3PO.
Right. They were witness to the entire story.
Yeah. But, I mean, do we really need them in the prequels?
No, you don't need them, but there are ways that you can introduce them that would work better. Instead of him being in the Queen's closet on the ship and that whole thing. And then the whole droid, the droid is to be commended. Keira Knightley's sitting there.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, it's a very well-made droid. And she's like, oh, yes, and it deserves our thanks. R2-D2.
Yeah.
That's just way too much, man. Like, everybody gets a medal except for Chewbacca. So.
He's got his medal now.
Yeah, but somebody had to die for that, though.
Oh, that's right.
The Royal Starship runs the blockade. All right, and
they made
the
it.
visual we're given is there's really one ship to beat. So okay, the planet's encircled by Trade Federation battleships.
Could you not gone up or down?
I'm sorry?
Could you not gone up or down? You had to go straight past one of those?
Well, regardless of where you're leaving the planet, to our eyes it would look like straight.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. I mean, 360 degrees, right? So you're flying away from the planet and there's a battleship in the way, at least one.
Yeah.
So they managed to restore their shields. They passed the battleship. They've suffered damage. The hyperdrive is damaged. there's a conversation, an argument really, between Qui-Gon and Captain Panaka. And Qui-Gon wins the argument. The crew will head to Tatooine for repairs.
Convenient.
Credit Obi-Wan, because he's looking at the star charts and determines that Tatooine is close enough and it fits a profile. It's not part of the Republic, and the Trade Federation has no presence there. Panaka is resistant to the idea because Tatooine is controlled by a criminal syndicate, the Hutts. Their experience on Tatooine
is wizard. Sorry.
It brings us to Mos Espa. Very similar in most respects to Mos Eisley. And in their search for parts, they meet Watto and Anakin. First, let's talk about Watto. He's a digital character. Did you like him?
I enjoyed him. I thought he was a shrewd businessman. Knows his Nubian parts. And
Nubian,
yeah,
huh?
since it was a digitally created character, I thought it was very well done. It didn't look out of the ordinary. It looked like it actually belonged at Tatooine, from the facial hairs to the expressions and the wings and everything. I thought I really enjoyed it.
I actually like Watto too. I thought he was funny. I thought he played the part that you wanted. He's the shady businessman who is on this world full of criminal elements, and he's carved out a space for himself. I think he gets better as his rendering as a digital character gets better as the film goes on. The films go on, I should say. His neck beard was a little weird in this film. Upon further review, I remember when seeing this movie for the first time, everything looked gorgeous. And I'd still say about 85% of the special effects in this movie stand up 20 years later, which you can't say for a lot of films with digital effects in them.
Yeah, I like that it was force sensitive, or not force sensitive, but
force resistant.
Yes, thank you.
So my question is, how come these guys haven't taken over the universe?
The Toydarians?
Yeah.
Because they just get squashed like a bug.
Well, yeah, but the force.
They don't have a lot of
fight
fight.
on them, though.
But they don't have a lot of fight in them. I mean, it's not like they're more interested in money, I believe, and making a profit.
Right. So
they're gambling.
They're the Ferengi before the Ferengi.
Yeah.
The mind trick doesn't work, but that doesn't indicate resistance to the force. It just indicates that there's intellect.
Perhaps.
The force can have a powerful influence on the weak-minded. The Toydarians aren't weak-minded. Jabba the Hutt isn't weak-minded. Plenty of humans walk around Mos Espa. Jedi mind trick wouldn't have worked on many. It would have worked on some. If you're smart, right? If you're not weak-minded, the mind trick doesn't work. Now, obviously, all the other powers would have worked, but
you could force lightning the hell out of them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Force choke them. Absolutely right. Exactly. Yeah. Watto has a lot of personality.
He does. And like I said, I like the fact that, his character fits in very well with what's going on there. Yeah. On Mos Espa, and his gambling and his trying to set himself up and manipulate the situation in such a way that he's going to benefit financially from it. Like all that stuff. Like it's all very believable, and it's executed very well. And some of the best performances are actually delivered by digitally created characters that have voiceovers, like Sebulba and Watto. Like these are some of the things that really stand out to us as good characters, or well done or well executed characters, and they're not even real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it speaks to the quality of the film and just how far ahead Lucas was using the technology, applying the technology. Yeah, great job. You meet Watto and okay, I understand. All of these things are possible. Great personality, expression, subtlety. With a better personality, Jar Jar's a good character.
Yep.
Well, yeah.
Right.
He
Instead,
becomes way more sympathetic. He becomes
Right.
heroic. He becomes
Right.
all the things that you wanted him to be. And you
Right.
could probably still pander to the kids a little bit. But yeah.
Right.
I mean, like, Watto, to me, is, like you say, probably what Jar Jar should have been, in the sense of there's some humor there. There is some, there's the opportunity for the awkwardness based on, the physiology. And yet, like you say, there's still personality. There's still, motivation and drive and intellect there, and all that stuff. And it's still something funny and blue floating around that the kids could get after,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And we meet Anakin. Anakin's introduced. Jake Lloyd. First scene with Padme. Ouch.
And what are we, like, what, half an hour, 45 minutes into the movie, and we finally get to Darth Vader?
Yeah. Well, he's not the main character.
No,
Who
this
is?
series.
Who is
this
that?
So this series is either Palpatine's trilogy or it's Obi-Wan's trilogy.
The question you asked, David, was raised in a review, and it can't be answered. There isn't a main character in episode.
There's no protagonist in this movie.
But yes, that scene with Padme to start off again.
It's the first of many awkward love scenes.
Yeah. What's the age difference again? Isn't it like 6 years?
Well, at the time of filming, Padme, Natalie Portman's 16, and Jake Lloyd is
9.
9, 8,
10?
9.
This gives me the willies.
So.
Just so awkward. Like that would ever happen.
But it doesn't. Not in this movie.
I know.
Well, now does it?
But I mean, yeah, he made that poor snippet little thing.
He made that girl jewelry.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Like, he dropped it on her on the boat. They were leaving on the boat. He's like, "What's up, girl? Don't you forget."
he knows. He's got the moves.
Yeah.
He definitely has the moves.
He's throwing it. And she's picking it up too. She's like, "Oh, hey, I'll never."
It's just running with the ball.
I don't need jewelry to remember you. Oh,
Yeah,
oh, like all that stuff. That's all. That's all Lucas love lines, man. His love dialogue, and it just gets worse in Clones. But we can deal with that on another show. But I'm just saying, like,
Padme feels sorry for him. It's like a big sister, little brother relationship at this point.
You sure?
That makes it even worse.
You sure?
Yes.
So it goes from that, but then it goes into a sympathy situation on another level. And then ultimately she truly, deeply loves him.
Well, he's a war hero too,
He grows up. Up.
It's that rat tail, I'm telling you.
Seriously, with that jewelry scene that he has with her, just is just so awkward.
It's all bad. It's bad.
Brutal.
The angels?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh.
Are you an angel?
We can all agree, watching the scene, we were not feeling chemistry.
No.
Okay.
Queasy.
Yes.
Between the characters, but also between the actors.
There's no spark.
Nope.
Qui-Gon cannot make a deal. He's turned away. He only has Republic credits. The crew from Naboo leaves Watto's shop, and after they leave, there's an interaction between Watto and Anakin. Watto he gives Anakin a chore and then tells him he can go home.
Clean the racks.
Clean the racks.
Sweep the racks. Then as Anakin goes out into Mos Espa, he's going home. You have Jar Jar getting into trouble, right? Trying to eat something from a street vendor, and then we're introduced to Sebulba, and Anakin happens.
There's a lot of things that just are very convenient. They happen so we can move the plot along. Did Anakin really clean the racks? Now he just runs off after the angel girl and her crew. Everything that happens is a convenient. Jar Jar just decides that in the middle of a town that's run by a criminal enterprise, that it's a good idea to shoplift a frog on a stick, and then then Sebulba, wants to kick the hell out of him, and then Sebulba, who has a reputation for being very violent, somehow backs down to
Yeah,
Anakin. And then magically, as we're all standing around talking about this, a sandstorm arrives. So we all have to go hang out at Shmi's place. The old lady.
Yeah.
Oh, a
Oh
storm's
yeah.
coming, Annie.
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
Feel it in my bones.
yeah, right. Yeah, I'm sitting on my porch. My left knee aches. That means snow. Okay. When my right knee aches, it means rain. When they both ache, it's a sandstorm.
And so, as you said, Sean, we're on to Shmi's house.
Before we get into the awkward interactions between all the characters around the dinner table, I would just like to call out a couple of things about this whole thing about slavery. Anakin refers to some kind of tracker thing or whatever that can blow you up, if, whatever. But other than that, that's like the only real enforcement mechanism to the slavery dynamic that's going on, on Tatooine.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we get into the even more problematic, the guardians of peace, justice, and freedom in the galaxy, the Jedi, are not there to free any slaves, or are not interested in freeing slaves once slaves are discovered. Really kind of just, it doesn't seem to fit with the mandate or with the direction of what the Jedi are supposed to be.
100% agree. And when I saw the film, the first 3, 4, 5 times, it really bothered me. But then over time, I've come to realize that for me, Qui-Gon is the finest example of a prequel Jedi, right? He embodies all of the Order's weaknesses, right? So he's a guardian of peace and justice, but he accepts evident wrongs like slavery and gambling. He even participates in the gambling.
Right.
He's arrogant. He's self-righteous. He's overconfident. He totally oblivious to the Phantom Menace, and he can't see Anakin's shortcomings. It just goes on and on. I mean, he's a huge man. He's physically imposing, but when he's confronted by a trained opponent, he loses. Right? He's the sum of all the Jedi's vulnerabilities. He's what the Order's become. He's terribly flawed, and for that reason, he fits perfectly with the timeline, the malaise that's affected the Republic and the Jedi Order. So at first it really bothered me, and I felt the contradiction. But then over time, I've come to see him as representative. Through Qui-Gon, we get to experience that condition of the Jedi Order, why they were ready to fall.
I guess this speaks to your earlier question that we had about the relationship between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. Because if Obi-Wan is a character that represents something that is sort of an uptick or an anomaly within the Jedi Order, is someone who actually sees things for what they are, can sense the Phantom Menace, and truly does believe in, the moral code, is he hindered by the dogma? Is he the guy who is willing to sacrifice or ignore the right thing because he wants to follow the rules and be a good apprentice? And is that also emblematic of what's wrong with the Jedi? The dogma gets in the way of doing the right thing.
I think what we're supposed to take from the prequel trilogy is Obi-Wan leans too far in the opposite direction. The Council talks to Qui-Gon, and afterward, Obi-Wan tells us that Qui-Gon is rebellious, and if he would just conform, he would already be on the Council. So it sounds like, Obi-Wan is the rule follower, but he's not. He's not. I think what we see in Episode 2 and Episode 3 is Obi-Wan is willing to bend and break rules for a better outcome. He's not as dogmatic. He's not as robotic. He's not as locked into his opinions, but but maybe skews too far the other way.
Well, we see the beginning of his rebellious behavior at the end of Phantom Menace,
Mm-hmm.
where he's channeling Qui-Gon in a way where he's threatening to, train Anakin even if the Council forbids it. And so, yeah, I can see that as he's moving along. But it's also interesting because the way that a lot of people have been upset, obviously, by midichlorians and that representation of the Force and how the Force works and how it interacts with everyone in this movie, and how George went biological and transactional over spiritual. Obi-Wan in Episode 4 tells Luke about the Force and about how it's this energy field and all this other stuff, and nobody ever talks about midichlorians in the original trilogy. And the supposition was, or the opinion of that was, that this is being told to us this way because these guys have their version of the Force, or it's how they want to represent it versus what it really is. And it speaks to this transition away from dogmatic thinking and from what ultimately becomes a transactional nature of the Force in the prequels, into something else. But they're just telling Luke that because Luke, being the son of Anakin, who is the highest concentration of midichlorians ever known, he's probably got a pretty high concentration himself. They don't have to worry about Luke finding out that it's really not a spiritual thing because he's got it all in his blood anyway. But it's weird because you went, I guess, Obi-Wan, when we finally meet him in Episode 4, I mean, he's more worried about training Luke to kill Vader than he really is in imparting, the Jedi code, or whatever it is, about avoiding attachment and all this other stuff. Like, they don't even get into any of that with Luke between, Tatooine and Dagobah. Nobody tells him not to love anybody, They just tell him he has to stay on Dagobah and finish his training.
Yep.
So going to the midichlorians and the Immaculate Conception, I was just actually thinking about this, and my problem with this scene is that Qui-Gon didn't really react. I mean, he had like a little bit of a puzzled face, but there didn't seem to be a lot of angst or a lot of wondering about it. Wasn't brought back up. I don't think it was brought back up at any point in the prequels after this, but it almost seemed like it was like commonplace. Oh yeah, hey, we
happens all the time.
Yeah, this is commonplace. No big deal. All right, cool. Let's move on.
I just think that's Qui-Gon's personality. When Obi-Wan tells him that Anakin has the highest midichlorian count ever recorded, Qui-Gon is stoic. He doesn't have
deep thinker?
Dramatic. No. He's a deep thinker, but he doesn't have dramatic emotional reactions to things.
Which makes him a perfect Jedi, right?
Right, exactly. Like he's gathering information. He's processing everything. And I hope I'm not making apologies for the character, the writing, or the actor. But he never really has a big reaction to anything. He always plays it close to the vest, and that helps him. Like when he's negotiating with Watto, when Shmi shares that information with him, when he hears about the midichlorians, he's putting it all together, right?
He gets stabbed by Maul.
He's working on a plan.
I mean, I can buy that. To go back to what David was talking about, I think the Immaculate Conception thing is a little too on the nose. You have moral codes and beliefs and practices that revolve around this, what at one time was considered a spiritual thing of the Force. And that, you wander into a sci-fi universe and it's different and strange, and you have all these different species and these planets and all these different things, but you have this something that's sort of a stand-in for religion, right? It gives a diverse group of people a core set of values to rally around. But then you bring in something that is of our universe, the concept of the Immaculate Birth. I think that it's just one of those things where it's something that takes you out of the film again, and you do an eye roll and you kind of groan about it. You can take that concept of a virgins in the Force, and you can still have it around a traditional birth, right? It just feels like there's it wasn't necessary to bring in that blatant of a religious reference to the story and to the creation of Anakin as a person.
Well, we have only Shmi's word.
Sorry. She was young and needed the money.
Before she was a slave, she might have been a filthy junk trader.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
But there is no. At this point, it would be fair to say Anakin's origin is still unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's funny though, because it brings up something that is kind of humorous, is that Qui-Gon accepts everybody at their word. You know, Watto says, "I'm the only dude that's got a Nubian J-type, hyperdrive." And he's like, "Okay." And then Obi-Wan's like, "Hey, it's the highest concentration of midichlorians ever reported in the history of the universe." And he's like, "All right." And then she's like, "Hey, I'm a virgin and I had a baby." And he's like, "That's cool." Right? Like it's like
no biggie.
Yeah,
just another day.
Like I don't know, is he naive? Like what is his thing?
No, he's not.
Yeah.
Naive. He's not.
Because somebody says something to him and he's just like, yeah, okay. Maybe he's just so force sensitive he knows when people are telling the truth.
This conversation brings us to the midi-chlorians. Yeah. So, I mean, it's one right after the other. The midi-chlorians, subject of so much criticism in the Star Wars fandom. Talk to me about the midi-chlorians.
Before these movies came out, we had the original trilogy, and the discussion about the Force was that the Force is the ultimate egalitarian power, right? It exists in all things.
Surrounds us, combines us.
It surrounds us, combines us, it penetrates us, all that kind of stuff. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter, okay? So the story that we are told in the original trilogy about the Force is that if you calm yourself and you commune with the universe, you can connect to this energy in such a way that you display a power over the physical world. Okay? And then what you do with that power ultimately determines whether you're a Jedi or a Sith, because you can either use it for good or for evil. Now, go to the prequels. 16 years later, we get episode 1. Forget everything we told you about that and about how it's an aspirational force. It really just comes down to a blood test. It comes down to your genetics and your biology and your physiology. And that it doesn't matter now whether or not you can calm your mind and reach out with your feelings and commune with the Force and sense how it exists in all things. It really just matters how many bugs you have in your blood cells. And if you have more bugs than the next guy, you're going to be a Jedi. And if you don't, you're, going to work for Watto cleaning his racks for the rest of your life. It really destroys the spirituality of the Force, and it really makes me wonder how a galactic religion sprung up around it. And so then it takes it away from everyone. It takes it away from being an egalitarian principle or power, and it just comes down to it doesn't matter if you're a good person or a bad person, or whether you're a dedicated person who's training and trying to learn the ways of the Force. It just really comes down to let's do a blood test and find out if you got the religion. In the sequel trilogies, we just kind of stopped talking about midichlorians and moved on. So
are the midichlorians even mentioned in 2 and 3?
No.
I didn't think they were.
Never again.
But they're canon.
They are.
They are. But I'm not sold on the theory that the midi-chlorian count determines your force power. So
That's what that's kind of what they
That's
infer.
what Qui-Gon said.
Well,
The midi-chlorians allow you to. The midi-chlorians are what actually create our connection to the Force.
right. Hear me
And
out.
the more
Hear me
you
out.
have, the more connected you are.
The more connected you are. Exactly. That's where I was going. Yes, the more connected you are. So if we take what Obi-Wan tells Luke in his hut in episode 4 about, it's an energy field, it's created by all living things, it surrounds us, binds us, right? All that is still true. I think the midi-chlorian count might simply be a predictor of your power in the Force. Every single being has the midi-chlorians and can connect with the Force, as you said, through training, through meditation, right, through quieting your mind. Master Yoda and Anakin are the two that are mentioned. They're extremely powerful. They have high midi-chlorian counts, but they also train as Jedi. So it makes sense that they can do more. It's a combination of midi-chlorian count and discipline training.
I suppose, like, I can meet you halfway on that. It's like King Griffey Jr., right? Some people are naturally talented, but if they don't work out, they're going to blow out their Achilles 5 seasons in a row.
Exactly.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
You might end up sweeping out fathier stalls.
Well, that's really more about who your parents were at that point.
Perhaps they were filthy junk traders as well.
You know what? That's going to be the thing. I think I want to put that on my tax return when they ask me what I do for a living. I'm going to be a filthy junk trader. You're
filthy, or the junk is filthy, or both?
Oh, both.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm a filthy person who only deals in filthy junk.
Move along.
I want to borrow a line from you, Sean, in saying the midi-chlorians are a disappointing concept because they make the Force more practical and less spiritual. And that was one of the things you complained about with the Rise of Skywalker. All of these advancements in Force powers just, Force Skype. It becomes a practical thing.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, want a lightsaber? Here you go.
Yeah, most of these Force powers that we see expanded are entirely in service of the plot. At the end of Revenge of the Sith, when Yoda says to Obi-Wan, I have a new lesson for you to learn, right? And he's like, Qui-Gon reached out to me from beyond, and he's figured some stuff out. Like, at least that's a deal where this is a new power for them in that era. Mm-hmm. The Force ghosty thing. For us, it's old hat, right? We saw it in, Empire and Return of the Jedi, and, like, it's a part of the deal.
Yeah.
But it was a new power that they were having to come to grips with in that. And even with the midi-chlorians and all that other junk, it's like Lucas is trying to bridge the gap and trying to have a logical progression of the Force powers between that series of films and the films that had come before. And it doesn't feel transactional. It doesn't serve any plot point in the prequels, but it is given as a thing that could be learned through a lot of hard work and meditation. And it's not something that everybody has. It's like not all Jedi can do it. There's conditions, there's rules. Like, it feels part of that universe. It has, ever since 77/83, whatever, the Force has been moving farther and farther away from a spiritual thing to some kind of mechanical, practical, tool that everybody just seems to be able to leverage and use as they need to serve a plot point.
So with the Immaculate Conception and the midi-chlorians behind us, we move to the pod race.
NASCAR in space.
Yeah.
This is pod racing.
That's
Not
Wizard
yet.
Annie.
Not yet.
Yeah, that's actually at the end of the movie.
Yes. The pod race is one of my favorite scenes.
I concur.
In the movie, not in the saga, but in the movie, it is exciting. It's fun. It's hot rods.
It's different.
It's yeah, I like the variety, the contestants, love the arena, the environment, everything. Well, I say everything. We're watching the film. We don't need an announcer to narrate what it is we're seeing. Jabba's appearance, there are some issues with the CGI, but
Didn't look like Jabba.
Yeah.
To me. My issue, I mean, this was by far my favorite part of the whole movie. My problem with it now, looking at it after 20 years, is the reaction of the fans didn't necessarily coincide with what was going on the track. There are two very distinct scenes where Qui-Gon, Shmi, and Padme, Qui-Gon looks like he's sleeping in both shots. And I'm sure he's trying to feel the Force and help Anakin out. I think that's probably the purpose of that. But you also have Padme, zero interest in what is going on. She's just kind of looking out into space. I mean, at least Shmi is looking at the video pad, trying to follow along what's going on. Padme has like zero concern, but I definitely love the fact that they went back in after the theatrical release and added a half lap or a whole nother lap to complete the entire course. Because you could see, I mean, there's 3 dots on that overhang of how many laps that you have to go. And I remember sitting in the theater going like, dude, where's the rest of it? I mean, I can count to 3, I think. What's going on? So, I mean, I love the Sebulba interaction. I love how, the sound coming up behind him, and I'm referring to Anakin, the sound coming up behind Anakin, and all the visuals and the obstacles and the Tuskens shooting at Anakin every time he comes by. He gets pegged, but doesn't necessarily do any damage, and how the other contestants get wiped out throughout the entire course. I love it. I think it's very well done. A lot of obviously hard work. And I love the fact that it was adapted to a N64 game. I love playing that game. It was, one of the funner N64 games that I got to play. So, I mean, wrapping all that up is great scene, well worth the 12, 13, 14 minutes or whatever it was in the film.
I'm not going to agree with that. Sorry.
That's all right. Hey,
No, I mean, first of all, it's a ripoff of Ben-Hur. Let's just be honest.
How many people here have actually seen Ben-Hur besides you, Sean?
Me.
You have?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, nice. Well, has he seen Citizen Kane?
I'm sure he
I
has.
have seen Citizen Kane.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
At least somebody gets my references. So, no, the whole Ben-Hur scene, the locking of the chariots together and tearing each other apart and fighting on the race course and all that stuff. I mean, even the Romanesque stands that everybody's sitting in watching the race go by. I mean, it's all very borrowed from that film. But what all that did was it served Lucas's idealized fantasy of Lucas's self from his youth. He's a race guy. He loves cars. He loves going fast. Everything he does has some element of hot rod culture in it. Believe it or not, the Millennium Falcon is representative of the kid in Modesto who wrenched on cars and made ugly family sedans go fast. What was the point of that? I mean, let's be honest. Other than selling toys, it's a 15-minute MacGuffin. You know, it's like every '80s sitcom. You know, I need 10 grand so I can buy a new car, and oh, there just happens to be a dance contest where the prize is 10 grand. Let's go enter. You know,
Well, what would you have rather done? I mean, would you have rather had like a one lap and done,
no,
or
I wouldn't even have dealt with the damn pod racing myself. Again, there's so many ways that if you had to land on Tatooine and you had to find a way to fix the ship, Qui-Gon could have got into a dice game. Based on what we saw in this film, he could have got into a dice game with a couple of dudes. He could have
game
owned half the planet in 20 minutes.
game of craps?
Yeah.
It's true, and he shows he's willing to do it.
Yeah, why not? Yeah, why not get into chance games?
Yeah.
Hey, I'll bet my ship, if we roll dice, and some people are like, hell yeah, let's roll some dice, and then he's like, forced it, and it always comes up on red or blue or whatever color he wants, and then next thing you know, I mean, like we're gone. But again, it was like David said, it was gorgeous. It was fantastically rendered. It probably has the best of all the CGI in that film in it. But it's a lot of time, effort, and money wasted on something that really is not necessary at that length. It was too much. It was too much. This movie is borderline The Rise of Skywalker in the sense that there's so much stuff going on that we're trying to achieve in order to service a plot that it almost becomes just top heavy. And the fact that you have this gratuitous racing scene doesn't help.
Well, I liked it. I thought it added a lot to it.
Well, I'm saying if you wanted to make a different movie, if you wanted to make a movie about a down and out pod racer on Tatooine trying to do the right thing and raise money for orphans or whatever, like it becomes a whole different story. It becomes and you're pulling for him and you want him to win that race. And because that becomes the central point and the central conflict in the film. This thing is this big epic race and all this stuff and people dying and blowing up their pods and fighting and the Tusken Raiders are shooting at people and there's all this drama just simply so you can get $50 so you can buy a new oil filter for your spaceship. Like we haven't even got to the fact that we have to go back and we have to fight an occupation and a war and people are being put in death camps for processing or whatever. And we also have some Sith Lords we have to deal with and like all these other really more important things. But damn, man, we got to spend 25 minutes watching, Anakin make a left turn.
The pod race scene is going to take care of the hyperdrive and freeing Anakin. So the stakes should feel very high.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't. I'm thoroughly entertained. I love the scene. But when I was watching it, I wasn't feeling the tension of... I wasn't feeling all that was riding on it.
A closer finish, maybe?
No. It's just maybe with camera work, maybe to show us a more intense speed, maybe more more issues with Sebulba on the racetrack. I'm not sure. Again, I enjoyed the scene, so I'm not picking it apart. I just I never once felt that Anakin was going to lose.
Unless someone is going to go really rogue and do something truly shocking with a film, the protagonist is always going to make it through. There is a certain level of expectation when we go into these movies that our main characters are going to survive and they are going to triumph, and that's just the way it's going to be. Yet we are able to suspend that knowledge in the moment if the peril is portrayed in such a way that we doubt the outcome. And what you're talking about with the pod race is you never doubted the outcome. And I think part of that comes from what David was talking about with the characters who are supposed to be observing this event and who are supposed to have the highest level of emotional buy-in. There's a few moments there where the lady who plays Shmi, she'll turn away and she'll grimace because she's watching her son go through some peril. But Everybody else was mailing it in, and then it was just a whole lot of really great CGI.
Yep.
So it's time for the. Sorry, go ahead.
We get the part. We're heading back to the ship.
Yes.
Guess who shows up?
Yes.
My boy.
So Darth Maul hops on his motorized wheelchair and zooms out across the desert, attacks Qui-Gon.
Well, and then, so there's the whole scene where he lands on the planet with the interceptor and sends out the probe droids.
Probes, yeah.
Yeah, and again, there's a cut scene. Qui-Gon actually chops one of them with a lightsaber. Maul actually knows where to go to, because apparently, like at the beginning when he lands and he pulls out his binoculars, he looks at like 3 different settlements or two different settlements and sends all of his probes out all over the place. And so so he shows up in the desert to fight.
It's a short scene. It's a good one.
Oh yeah, I mean, again, we're starting to see, we're continuing, but we're seeing in this film, again, for the first time, Jedi and Sith in their prime. It was a good, it was brief, but it was a good, it was a good fight. And it didn't spoil the double lightsaber reveal. Technically, that had already been spoiled before the movie started, because it was out there in, I don't know, was it in the trailer?
I want to say it was in the figure.
Well, it's on the figure, yeah, and the figure was sold, and other images and whatnot, but it was kind of cool that we got that he can fight you one-on-one with a lightsaber, or he can go full lightsaber, double-ended staff weapon.
Very exciting taste of things to come. We get to see Maul in action. Right after this, we have the meeting between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker.
Ugh.
Terrible.
Forced.
Yeah.
Pleased to meet you. Hi. I'm going to kill you later. On the Death Star. Pleased to meet you.
You'll be the death of me.
Har, har. Don't say that, Master. Wah, wah. Okay.
And we're off to Coruscant. And so ends this installment. Part 2, Coruscant to the Trade Federation's defeat, will be posted soon. Thanks to David and Sean for their time. Thank you, listener, for joining us. Galactic Initiative is not authorized or endorsed by Lucasfilm Limited. The names Star Wars and all related materials are registered trademarks of Lucasfilm Limited, a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company. All rights reserved. Other product and company names are trademarks of their respective holders. Use does not imply affiliation or endorsement. Before you go about your business, remember,
These aren't the droids we're looking for.